Sit in New York airport. Not the most pleasant way to spend an evening, Max thought Tron, watching the boarding process for what he hoped would be his flight home to Charlotte. Max, along with his two sisters, owned a small pharmaceutical company created by their father several decades earlier. His father developed a series of valuable but rarely used drugs that made the company profitable but never offered much room for growth. His parents had passed away, and Max had spent the last few days in New York negotiating the sale of the company to a major pharmaceutical concern. Max and his team of lawyers and brokers closed the deal today and left it to the lawyers to complete the paperwork. Max hoped he would make it home tonight, but it looked doubtful. The last flight of the day to Charlotte was fully booked, and he was third on the wait list. He didn't call his wife Camilla because he didn't know what to tell her. He sat at the bar where he could watch the gate and drank his second gin and tonic thinking about the deal and the money he and his sisters would share, something over $10 million for him, plus a well-compensated transition period with Big Pharma meant a new lifestyle for him and Camilla. Their twin girls were already out of the nest or at least on their way. Both were in college, juniors at Duke, where tuition was eating him alive. But all this will change when the deal with the pharmaceutical company closes. Meanwhile, the boarding process was ending and the agents at the gate were ushering the last passengers onto the plane. And then a small miracle happened. The boarding sign changed and Max saw that his name appeared on the waiting list. He threw the money on the bar, waved to the bartender who gave him a thumbs up, grabbed his briefcase and duffel bag and ran for the exit. The agent at the gate handed him his boarding pass and quickly explained to him and two other passengers that the group of four who had checked in remotely had not shown up, so they were given seats. Max ran down the plane with his new buddies, and when he got to the gate, he realized he had a first-class seat. A good sign, he thought. I got on the flight. I'm sitting in first class home a day early. This may mean that the pharmaceutical deal will indeed close. The boarding door closed as he boarded, and the flight attendant asked if he wanted something to drink as they taxied to the runway. He felt like he'd earned another drink, so he drank another GMT and then fell asleep, dreaming of a future for him and Camilla with enough money to always fly first class. The shock of landing woke him up. He eventually made it to the taxi stand to take a taxi home. He had driven his pickup truck to the airport a few days earlier, but now he was exhausted, a little drunk, and it was really late, too late to call Camilla to come get him. They lived a few miles outside of Charlotte, so the cab ride was long enough for him to fall asleep again. The driver had to wake him up when they arrived. Max paid him, added a generous tip, and a little sluggishly got out of the taxi. It was a long, busy day and evening. He was already thinking about getting cozy in bed with Camilla when the taxi pulled away, and he turned towards the house. What he saw stopped him in his tracks and woke him up completely. A gold Mercedes was parked in the driveway in front of the side of the garage. The car seemed like a very fashionable Mercedes, but then all Mercedes seemed fashionable to him. The house was dark. By then it was past midnight, and Max just stood there for several minutes. He spoke to Camilla from his lawyer's office around noon, and she said nothing about late-night visitors. He tried not to think about the unthinkable, tried to create a happy scenario that would allow him to snuggle up to warm, sleepy Camille in just a few minutes. However, his mind didn't work that way, so he slowly walked towards the door in the passage between the garage and the house. He unlocked it, entered the quiet house, and walked even more slowly through the kitchen and up the stairs to his and Camilla's bedroom. The bedroom door was open, apparently not expecting visitors, and Max stepped inside, and then it closed. There was no other way to express it. His brain stopped working. He stopped breathing. Even his heart seemed to stop beating. He saw what he considered unthinkable. Camille slept naked, spread out on her side of the bed with one arm, wrapped around the man who was also sleeping, even smiling slightly in his sleep. Max stood there for what seemed like an eternity, but eventually his brain started working again. He looked again at Camilla's hand, lying across the man, and they both snored. This broke Max's heart. Until tonight, he had enjoyed listening to Camille snore. She was snoring quietly, almost purring, Max thought. He thought her snoring meant she felt absolutely safe, deep in the peaceful sleep that came from sharing a bed and life with Max. He often fell asleep with that soft, purring sound in his ears. But that's all. He would never hear that snoring again. Never sleep next to her again. Even with his heart broken, Max began to think again. He saw the man's clothes neatly folded, lying on the chair that Max had sat on hundreds of times. Smoldering rage began to flare up inside Max. He pulled up his pants and pulled out his wallet and car keys, then stopped to think a little more. He could get the tennis racket out of the bedroom closet and use it to beat the asshole up, he decided. He could also beat Camille. Both of these actions, while satisfying in the short term, could cause big problems for Max in the long term. Another idea began to form in his mind. He took out his cell phone to take some incriminating pictures as the idea germinated and expanded. Max finished taking pictures and then collected all of asshole's clothes and shoes. The asshole was a big guy. Max was 5 feet, 10 inches tall, and weighed about 160 pounds. The asshole looked at least 4 or 5 inches taller and perhaps 50 pounds heavier. A tennis racket may not have been a good idea even in the short term. Taking his clothes and shoes in his hands, Max took one last look at his wife, his loving beloved wife, the mother of his precious daughters, and hardened his heart against the love that had fueled him for more than 20 years. He left the bedroom still without tears and headed back down the stairs to the outside. The key fob beeped and the Mercedes doors opened. Max put his briefcase and duffel bag inside and slid into the driver's seat. He was never a fan of fancy cars, but when he got into the Benz, he realized that he liked it. He figured out the controls, put the car in gear, and drove off. After about a mile, Max pulled over and looked at asshole's wallet. The usual things: some money, business cards that identified asshole as Franklin Thompson, a senior sales manager at a local Mercedes dealership, a driver's license that showed a Charlotte address. If asshole had family there, Max figured he could cause some real trouble for asshole, of course, and maybe Camille too. But at the moment, Max was exhausted and headed to the nearest motel to get some sleep. Camilla Tronter was a very careful person. She knew that she was not as smart as her husband Max, but thanks to her caution, her affair with Franklin Thompson lasted almost 5 months without Max suspecting anything. Max was still in New York, she thought, as she lay in bed with Franklin the next morning. He was good in bed, maybe not as good as Max, but out of bed, he could not compete with his husband. Too much like a car salesman, she thought, coming to the conclusion that it was time to end this affair. Franklin was becoming too possessive. He wanted to spend the night with her, and she allowed it, but that would be the last time she did that. She planned to spend the rest of her life with Max and have a strange man in their marital bed. Even if Max will never know about it, it was still too disrespectful. She would call Franklin later today and gently but sternly tell him that their affair was over. Then she headed to the shower. Back in the bedroom, she was getting dressed when Franklin returned from the shower. With a towel around his waist, he stood there for a moment and then asked, "Camilla, where did you take my clothes?" "What? I didn't move anything anywhere." "Where are you all going this evening?" "I folded it right here on this chair." "But there are no clothes." "Did you take her with you to the guest room?" "She must be here somewhere." Aye, he muttered, heading back down the hallway to the guest room and then immediately returned. "No, there's nothing there. There's nothing here." His voice trailed off as he tried to comprehend the disappearance of his clothes. "Perhaps you left everything downstairs when we came in the evening." Camilla asked a little impatiently, thinking that they had both drunk too much the night before. "No, I'm sure I didn't, but I think I'll go take a look," Franklin answered, heading out of the bedroom. He quickly returned, running up the stairs. Camilla, my car is not there. My clothes are not downstairs. Someone was here at night, took my clothes and stole my car." "Ah, damn it, what's going on?" "I'm sorry, what?" Camilla tried to comprehend what Franklin was saying. How could his clothes and car go missing? The two of them stayed in the house all night. Could someone have gotten inside? Suddenly, Camilla collapsed on the bed. It was Franklin's turn to ask, "What? What?" Camilla tried to formulate a response, but she found it difficult to breathe, let alone speak. "Franklin, what if it was Max?" She finally said, "What if he came home from New York while we were sleeping? What if he took your things and your car?" "Oh shit," Franklin said, collapsing on the bed next to Camilla. "You need